Hi everybody, welcome to Colorado Inside Out. I'm your host Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you for joining us. Let's get a quick take on the story out of Grand Junction that made national news this week about the school that suspended a girl who shaved her head to support a friend with cancer. Patty Calhoun from Westward. Now, the school reversed their stance and everything is the dust is settled for the little girl, but do you think schools around Colorado are looking at their own zero tolerance policies to see, after seeing this kind of uproar?
Well, we've seen a lot of stupid zero tolerance policy results, but this one might be the worst. As you can tell from the man sitting next to me, there's nothing wrong with being follically challenged.
Yes.
It can be beautiful. It can be beautiful. That this 9-year-old girl, her best friend is suffering from cancer. She decided to shave her head in solidarity. A 9-year-old girl doing this, and she is banned from the classroom because her hairdo or lack thereof violates dress code policy. You can't believe they actually were so silly as to ban her even for a minute.
John Caldera from the Independence Institute. Was the only surprise here that this was Grand Junction and not Boulder?
Let me be clear. If I ran the damn school district, everyone would have their head shaved because I dislike anyone with hair. And you're going to figure that out soon enough. No, it's this one-size-fits-no-one policy that is public education, and it's ridiculous. But what we have are bureaucrats who are more afraid of going up against the system, and so they make the easier decision. That's not a big surprise. Once a year, there's a great thing I've been involved with as well called St. Baldrick's, and people shave their head to get money for kids' cancer. Not like I ever really lose a lot during that, but what if they did that? Are they going to kick her out for that as well? It should shine a light on just how little we put on education and how much we put on rules.
Ed Sealer from the Denver Business Journal. My only question out of it was, who was the guy who, it was 3-1 to reinstate her? Who was the person, I mean, guy or woman, that voted to not reinstate her? It was a crazy situation. What do you think?
Somebody who probably looks at the old 3 strikes and you're out policies where you get locked up for life even if your third arrest and conviction was something very minor. I remember those discussions back in the 90s, and thankfully they went away because people realized this zero tolerance is never a good thing because there can always be extenuating circumstances. So I expect that what we're not reading about right now is how a lot of school districts are quietly looking at and dusting off their policies and saying, let's change this.
Alicia Kohler from the Denver Post, finish it up for us.
Well, this was a small charter school with some very strict dress codes, and they had not come up against anything like this before. And frankly, they have an exemption policy, and they didn't use common sense at the front end and just say, hey, wait a second, before we toss this kid out, let's go through the exemption process. In any case, they created a situation that they fast became uncomfortable with as national news zeroed in on them. So I suspect you'll see them tweak their policies, and other schools would do well to do the same.
Hear, hear. Representatives Cory, Gardner, and Mike Coffman made headlines this week by announcing that they no longer support the Personhood Amendment ballot issue. Both candidates supported the issue in the past, and the reversal drew predictable criticism from both their Democratic opponents in the 2014 election and pro-life advocates. Patty, is this flip-flop for both of them going to pay off for the 2014 election?
Well, it's not. It certainly isn't going to hurt in the very short term because if there were a big primary, if Cory Gardner really had people he was still running against besides Randy Baumgartner, he might have to still support personhood because, as we've seen with the Republican Party before, the more conservative candidates are often the ones who make it out of the primary. Since he doesn't really have that primary problem, since Coffman is an incumbent, he doesn't have it, they can get past then. But come fall, people are certainly going to be merciless on this flip-flop. You can't say that they saw the light about the fact that abortion is obviously the law of the land, that Colorado is the first state to legalize a woman's right to choose, that is definitely where Colorado voters are going, and especially Colorado women voters are going. But in November, the Democrats will rightly point out that these guys have flip-flopped, and is it because they truly changed their mind or they just looked at the polling numbers?
John, what do you think about the effectiveness of the reversal? It's March, so I mean, it gives it plenty of time to adjust, but will it be effective? Will they still be tagged with the support because they had support in the past?
Of course it will. It's politics, but let's look at the history of this. when these guys signed on, they were in very, very safe Republican districts at the time. Mike Coffman's district has changed completely. It was one of the safest in the nation. Now it's up for grabs. And in those kind of districts, it was a check mark. It wasn't something you really thought about. It wasn't even something you studied. It was like, are you anti-abortion? Yes, I am. You support this person? Yeah, sure, okay. And you check it. Republicans, even pro-life Republicans, have changed their stance on the Personhood Amendment. You look at folks like former Senator Bill Armstrong, who does not support this initiative, but is highly pro-life because it's too restrictive. And I think if people understand the history of that, it's not going to be as damaging to these politicians.
Ed, what do you think about the political season? Be doing this in March, is that going to help them, kind of inoculate them before they get to the general election? Will it tag them for too long? What do you think?
I mean, as someone who's more of a policy guy than a politics guy, I'm astounded we are putting this much effort into looking at votes on a 4-year-old failed constitutional amendment. I mean, if frankly, I mean, just call it like I see it. If the Democrats are focusing so much on this, they have got to be scared out of their minds, because this is not the issue that we should be talking about right now. At a time when the economy is still stagnant, at a time when Cory Gardner and Mark Udall have wildly differing views on energy, a topic that has been shown to be something that's really important to Coloradans, this is all we're hearing about right now, is personhood. And this can't be the deciding factor when it comes down to these. I think, and just from a political standpoint, I think they're reversing their decisions on this was both good and bad. I mean, good because it will get them a little farther away from anyone whose vote would be decided on that. Although, frankly, I don't think they change anybody's mind by making this decision. And bad because they are now talking about this instead of talking about what, maybe Mark Udall should be doing, what Cory Gardner should be doing, what Mike Coffman should be doing, any of that. So I'm just surprised we're reading so much about this. And if we are still reading this much about it come September, October, this election could go a lot of different ways.
Alicia, what do you think about how this is going to turn out? I mean, Ed makes a very interesting point. Is this the distraction du jour, or is this going to have some legs?
Well, it possibly could be part of a scary outside the mainstream narrative that won't live or die on this one issue, but could be part of a larger story. Now, I think Gardner has more of a problem with this than Coffman. Coffman has been slowly backing away by not stating support and that sort of thing. And while Ed's right, the last constitutional question was 4 years ago. Cory Gardner, in the last 2 sessions, co-sponsored the Life Begins at Conception Act. So he's not that distanced from it. So I think it could be more of a problem for him than for Coffman.
Denver County Sheriff Gary Wilson met with a city council committee this week to address concerns over the growing number of inmates being booked in Denver jails. Highlighted in the report was the estimate that Denver jails will likely reach capacity by 2015. John, there's a lot of issues going on in Denver and in Colorado regarding inmates and jails and overcrowding. If the sheriff comes to the city council and says, hey, we're going to be at capacity in less than a year, is that going to be triggered to build more jails? Does that mean we're going to be letting more bad people out? What do you read from the announcement?
What I read from this is going to be a lot of bond attorneys that are licking their chops who say, wait, we can finance yet another expansion of the jail. It was 2006 when Hickenlooper sold this idea of not just expanding the jail we have, but blowing it up and having a brand new one. And the worry back then was that there was going to be excess capacity. My guess is if you take a look at the numbers, you'll find out that it's a lot of people who have drug convictions that instead of bonding out or just spending their time in the jail, you're going to find people from other counties who are jailed in there. And you might also find some people who belong in ICE instead are in the Denver County Jail. This is not a capacity problem. This is a management problem.
Ed, we've seen some back and forth between Aurora and Adams County about the municipal inmates back and forth. They've kind of shifted some of their inmates. Do you think that might become an issue for Denver, or is there other issues at play?
I don't think that'll play into Denver as much. It shines a little bit more spotlight on this issue, though, of jail overcrowding. What was really surprising about this, though, is that, I have never covered Denver City Jail or County Jail, excuse me, or any of those issues.
From the outside.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I've never, anyway. But I've seen the state budget, and in recent years, the state budget projections for inmates have been going down, down, down. Now we're actually seeing a slight increase in the projection of inmates for next year. But what that tells me is something seems askew about the way that Denver's jail population is booming at a time when the state's prison population is actually decreasing. And I think that's the question that should be looked at, not the, oh, what are we going to do about this? But, kind of go to what John said there. I can't believe I just complimented John. But, to ask why. Who is in here? Why are they in here? Why are they growing when others aren't? And maybe what this will do, instead of, getting everyone in a tizzy about what to spend, is get them into research mode and decide, do we need to dump a lot more money into expanding this jail, or do we need to look at our prison population a little differently?
Alicia, what do you think? Will this trigger some reform?
Well, the counties have been complaining for some time that as the legislature moves to bust some of these crimes down to lesser offenses, they don't get a fiscal note for that. That's the big no-no over there. You don't want anything with a price tag. But they do sort of push that burden onto the counties, and I think that's at least part of what we're seeing here. Also, some contract inmates, as John mentioned, ICE. When Aurora can't get their inmates into, the Adams County Jail, they'll parcel some out to Denver. I think there's also some implications for staffing. The jail has had some problems, as we've all read about, in staffing its jail, and they're going to have to not only ramp up, the numbers of people they have there, but the professionalism as well. So I think that'll be another implication.
Patty, is it a real problem that looks to be reformed, or is this about a staffing issue?
Well, you'd like to go back and look at the numbers when we planned this whole big justice complex and the new jail, because you can't believe that Denver is so crime-ridden or the cops are so efficient. We had that argument a couple weeks ago, that all of a sudden we are packing it way beyond what people had predicted we would need back when we approved that bond. I think it's definitely more an issue of management, although they do seem to have come up with a good plan, which is if they let inmates continue to escape, there will be room.
Actually, I think you're missing a point, that none of this happened until Douglas Bruce stayed there, which made it a great vacation spot. And so people from all over are coming in.
We knew there's going to be new tourism, but we didn't know that kind of tourism. That's a good point, John. Let's get to the next part. Nate Marshall dropped his bid for the State House this week after demands from Jefferson County Republican Party leaders. The outcry came after a Denver Post story detailed Marshall's arrest record and ties to white supremacy organizations. Ed, did Jeffco Republicans just dodge a huge PR bullet? Should more background checks have been done? What happened here?
Well, it's hard to say you're going to be doing background checks when this guy was nominated from the floor. This was not like somebody the Republicans went out and recruited. He stood up at his county assembly. He noticed, hey, you've got absolutely nobody running against Max Tyler, which, basically, after several years of trying to unseat Tyler not being successful, this has slipped to a second or third tier race for Republicans, especially since this is Tyler's last election before he's term limited. So I don't know that this is a case where, you have to look for wholesale system changes that come from this. This is, maybe you don't nominate people from the floor, but if you don't nominate people from the floor, then you just have more races where nobody's running in. So, did they dodge a huge PR bullet? It's not like Marshall was going to be running in CD4 against somebody where, he could have taken a race that had a big spotlight on it and turned it into, hey, look who the Republicans came up with, where the Democrats then try to taint them like, hey, everyone in this party is a white supremacist. It was a race that wouldn't have gotten any attention, and frankly, even had this come out, after it was a one-on-one between him and Tyler, it would have been like, oh, that's who we nominated? All right, let's look elsewhere. But it does beg the question, maybe if anything comes out of this, both parties should be a little more aggressive on trying to fill seats, even if it's just with a party volunteer, so that things like these don't come from the floor.
Alicia, what do you make of the story? It seemed to, only the real insiders were paying attention to what was going on at county assemblies, and suddenly a white supremacist who is, quote, not a hater, and then you see what his Twitter feed looked like. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I do think that they, to some extent, dodged a bullet. The sooner the better. His views are really not, as Bill Tucker, the GOP chair, said out there, not emblematic of the Republican Party. And it would kind of give some ammunition to people who would like to paint it as such. So, good for them for figuring this out pretty early in the process.
pretty early in the process, Patty, is not a Republican trait. And we had Dan Mays get all the way to Election Day. So this is new. So maybe is there some reform going on in the Republican Party?
They do seem to be moving a little faster, much to our dismay, because it means we're not going to be able to kick him around after this show. And of course, maybe he could have done like the personhood move, just to say, oh, I've changed my mind about all that, and see how it could have gone. So I think that Republicans were lucky that he just decided it was a good time to get out. But it's disappointing for those of us who sit at this table.
Sure. John, did the Jeffco Republicans break the Caldera rule that they didn't screw this one up?
Yeah, for those who don't know, Caldera's first political axiom, there's nothing Republicans can't screw up. And look at this guy. Here's a guy who has said disparaging things about gays, about Muslims, about the occupiers. But, in his defense, he said disparaging things about the occupiers. So, you got that. It only shows the bench problem that our team has, Republicans have. We don't have a bench. We don't even have a folding chair. That we don't have a AAA league and a AA league to bring people up. The left does that masterfully, but it doesn't happen on our team. It's harder to get people to sacrifice that much of their life to get involved in lower government so that they can run for higher government. The other really damaging part of this is it's Jeffco. Jeffco is becoming the epicenter of Colorado politics, as goes Jeffco, as goes the state. And so that's a shame as well.
Clerical issues are to blame for yet another Colorado prisoner mistakenly being released early from jail. On Tuesday, the Department of Corrections sent a Jefferson County inmate home instead of back to prison after his parole was canceled. According to our partners at CBS 4, he was recaptured after a 2-day search. Alicia, the producers and I have been tempted to start playing yakety sax underneath these stories because it seems every week we're hearing about some inmate being released early, fortunately being caught a couple days later, whether it's Denver or Jefferson County or the state. Is it time for this to become a bigger issue?
This is an issue that emerged about a year ago when there was a report, an audit that showed that hundreds, really, of prisoners had been released early. And the problem seems to be, it's a confluence of things. Complex sentencing laws, the relay of these sentences is not being done properly. And sometimes the DOC just misreads what the sentence is. So, I think there does need to be some wholesale revision in the process, and probably some updating, some digitization, and some standardization. A lot of zations there, but to ensure that this sort of thing doesn't happen, because we don't want to have another Evan Ebel, who shot and killed the former DOC chief, and that's the potential here when you let people loose who shouldn't be loose.
Patty, Alicia brings up a very good point because I can have some fun with this because we haven't had another Evan Ebel, but because of that big event last year, we had thought that there'd be a little bit more progress, at least some reform here. What did you make of the announcement this week?
Well, and after Evan Ebel's incident last year, they went back and found all the sentencing issues, the problems in the court. So they were really trying to clear it up. They found, over 100 problems where the sentencing had been misread. But these problems, these current ones, seem to be issues just kind of safety at the door, of control, of management. It's not like it's Nate Marshall who's just walking out the door. I don't know if his criminal record was in Jefferson County, but they should be able to figure out that some of these people should not go out on the streets unless they really have decided it's the way to get around overcrowding.
Again, being very creative, I like that. John, is this an opportunity for a politician out there, a candidate looking to make some waves to say, this is going to be my signature story, because it seems to be affecting throughout the entire metro area?
And we've, at the Independence Institute, given a lot of thought and done a lot of work on this idea of clerical errors leading to people being released. And after a lot of work, we've decided we're against it.
That is amazing, pithy analysis that I would expect nothing less.
This is not going to raise itself to something that's going to affect a race yet. There would have to be one more tragedy after someone is released, and then perhaps. But it also just shows that government is government at all levels, whether it's kicking out a kid who shaved her head for cancer or this. Any big bureaucracy is going to have these troubles, and this is where we need to focus more energy in safety, one of the core functions of government, and perhaps less elsewhere.
Ed, will this become a problem for either Governor Hickenlooper or something else if heaven forbid, something bad does happen with one of these released inmates?
I would have a hard time thinking you could link what's happening at the Jefferson County inmate home to Governor Hickenlooper. That's a bit of a stretch. I mean, that's like, saying that, Nate Marshall's nomination was Cory Gardner's fault, though I'm sure we'll probably see something on that.
You just triggered a great ad,
No, I mean, I think going back to our first conversation about the zero tolerance policy, it's kind of the same way here in that I don't think you can make a clean sweep and say, this is what's wrong in every one of these. I think you need to look at it on a case-by-case basis and figure out what's wrong. But I'll tell you what I would do is if I'm in charge of a prison population, if I'm in charge of an inmate population, I'm at least going to be giving a good, stern lecture to all of my employees. And that's in the places where this hasn't happened yet. Like, hey, folks, we're seeing a rash of this. I'm not saying you're doing it, but I think there is a little bit of a leadership issue that's got to come in now. Maybe not the first couple. They could have been flukes, but going forward, people should be warning their employees to look for things like this. And I think that'll be more of an issue as we continue.
We have a few minutes before Disgrace of the Week, so I'll bring up one of the topics we were chatting before everything started. The issue up in Boulder where a city councilman is proposing a way to reduce the dog waste being left on trails and parks would be to register all the dogs, get DNA samples, and be able to DNA test the different waste. This just sounded like a serious first world problem. Patty, what were your thoughts when you saw this?
Well, my first thought is you just stole my disgrace. This is I thought it was a joke when I first heard it. You cannot believe that in Boulder they don't have bigger things to worry about, like solving the John Benet Ramsey murder. And if this is going to happen, if they're going to go do DNA testing on all the dogs, are they going to also DNA test all the citizens so they can find out who, like John Caldera, is not recycling? They can check the fingerprints on the beer cans. It is really Big Brother is watching some really unpleasant stuff, it sounds like.
It does sound like that. John, you're a Boulderite. I mean, really the unelected ambassador of Boulder. I'm sure all of them are very excited about that new title. Was this just par for the course when you saw this?
Let me explain a little something about Boulder. People are people, but animals are more than people, and so we revere them. And so when they crap on our lawns, it's a blessing, really. And we celebrate that in Boulder, and therefore it is everywhere. I mean, it is amazing the arrogance that dog owners have in Boulder. So I understand the frustration that people want to do something about it, and the idea of creating an NSA for dog crap, I think really brings it to a high level. That is my hometown.
yes, it is. Ed, is there some does this show just how well Boulder is doing, that they're not worried about energy issues or the flood season, anything like that they could be concentrating on DNA samples with dog waste?
Actually, if I remember, Boulder is dealing with energy issues, that it's trying to start its own utility, which will probably be a huge bump in price. So, I mean, for some of the residents, so, I mean, as long as they're paying into that, they might as well pay to DNA test their dog. Two things that I thought of coming out of this. One, Boulder was the first city, I believe, in the country that changed the term pet animal companion on its official law book. So I'm guessing if the animals are raised to that status, they would first have to give their consent before you take the DNA. And secondly, if you're taking DNA, I mean, you got to make sure you're not doing it from one particular breed, because this could be used for profiling certain types of dogs. And I think there'd be people in Boulder angry about that.
Alicia, there are problems rife throughout this topic. Wrap it up for us.
It's pretty amazing that we have decades worth of, say, old rape kits that haven't been DNA tested, yet we're thinking about testing dog waste. It's really mind-boggling, but this is the city that gave us the Mapleton elk with its own Facebook page and vigils and such, so I guess I shouldn't be surprised, yet I am.
That's true. We really can't have a lot of stock on this. It's time for our very, very favorite part of the show, Disgrace of the Week. Sorry I stole your thunder on this, Patty, but start us off.
Fortunately, there are so many disgraceful things in this town, and I'm going to go with Denver Parks and Recreation pulling their city loop plan, which after all the neighborhood uproar, this is another example like US 36, where just not getting enough of the public involved, whether it's because the public wasn't paying attention, but you really need to communicate plans better. But I have to say, in saying that they were going to pull this $5 million proposal for City Park, Parks and Recreation just sounded so school-marmish and prudy pants about the bad neighbors who'd complained. And they said, we're just going to go put it in West Denver where people don't support obesity, basically.
John?
Fruity pants. All right, this is a disgrace that only parents of tweeners will get. But there's a gentleman named Cheng Ing who invented, this bastard invented the rainbow loom, which is this little rubber band thing that my daughter Piper is addicted to. There are rubber bands all over my house. The vacuum cleaner won't pick them up. We're coming after you. Parents are coming after you.
Ed?
The Associated Press, not just because it decided this week that we can now use the term over other than instead of more than, but because of why they decided it, because they said, well, everybody's doing it. Well then, should we be using the word like a lot more, or should we end all the sarcastic references in our story with LOL and a smiley face? Look, this has always been about, trying to be the keeper of the language, and giving into, well, everybody's doing it is a pretty dumb reason, but maybe I'm just more than thinking that.
No, I think there's E.B. White spinning in his grave. Alicia?
Secret Service for this sad saga of acting like frat boys all around the world. The latest incident being a Secret Service agent passed out, blackout drunk, in a hotel hallway in Amsterdam, had to be carried in by hotel employees. This is a years-long trend that involves strippers, hookers, drunkathons. Caldera wants to sign up. But the administration really needs to clean it up, even though it hasn't supposedly affected presidential safety. I mean, it's a bad image problem.
We had a lot of fun with Disgrace, so less than a minute, say something nice.
As we approach the 150th anniversary of the Sand Creek Massacre, Ari Kellerman, a DU alum, just won the Bangkok Prize for his book on the massacre site. It's a great read.
John?
A woman named Rebecca Ryan who decided to record her phone call with Connect for Health Colorado, and she was told that to keep her doctor, she'd have to pay a penalty, about $1,700 more a month for her special need.
Ed?
Mitt Romney. Now, I must admit, I never thought I would say that name again after 2012. But sometimes we in the media jump on people, like when Romney said, Russia is the greatest threat in the world today, and people tend to mock them. Mitt Romney looks a lot smarter today than he did in 2012.
Alicia?
Bill Tucker, who I mentioned earlier, the GOP chief in JEPCO, who's really set a standard for the party out there, and it's good to see.
That's all the time we have tonight. Thanks for tuning in. For everyone here at Channel 12, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching. Good night.